Hello, Shortcuts. Stephen here. This is video one for the price list that's going to go out on September 4th, um, which will probably be the last for a week or two because I have to go back to the UK unexpectedly. For those of you who haven't tuned into these videos, you're going to see a list of records. All of these will go on sale on a price list, which will be published at 9 p.m. on Wednesday, the 4th of September at 9 p.m. Sydney time, that's Eastern Standard Time, Australia. If you would like to be on the mailing list, email me or drop me a message at shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. Now, this first list is a genre list. So we've got jazz, blues, soundtracks, prog rock, reggae, soul, punk, all sorts. So, where to start? Well, I want to talk to you about someone called Alfred Lion. I wonder how many of you know who he is. He was a German Jewish refugee who made his way to the United States in the 30s. I think it was the 30s. I don't know if he made it late 20s or early. I'm pretty sure it was the 30s. But he was a music fan. When he'd been in Germany, he had been to some quite influential jazz shows by, American musicians, and it made an impact. And when he got to the US, he started a record label. And that record label was called Blue Note. 1939 it started. And he produced literally hundreds of records under his name until he sold the record when he had some health problems. He sold the record label, I think it was in the 60s. And he never put his name on anything. Except I think there was a note from him on maybe the second or third ever Blue Note release, where he talked about Blue Note being about the joy of jazz or something along those lines. He never put his name in anything, and he was proud of that. He said, if you have a Blue Note label that doesn't have my name on it, then I probably was responsible for it, which is pretty awesome. And rumor has it, I haven't been able to corroborate this from too many sources, but enough for it to be the case where it could well be that Alfred and I share the same favourite Blue Note album. And it's the first on tonight's list. And it is this. Now, my two favourite kind of Blue Note, let's call them subgenres, are guitar jazz and piano jazz. And so I'm going to talk about both, although the second record I'm going to talk about is on Verve, not Blue Note. But this is quite possibly, it's up there with Moanin'. I think it's between this and Moanin' by Art Blakey as my two favourites. But this and Blue and Sentimental by Ike Quebec. But this is awesome. This is Midnight Blue by Kenny Burrell. Now, the rest of the band, Stanley Turrentine on tenor sax. Now, Stanley Turrentine and Kenny Burrell are honey and gold together. They make such a sweet sound. Major Holly Jr. on bass, Bill English on drums, and the other star of the show is Ray Barretto on conga. Now, those of you might remember that I had Acid, a Ray Barretto record, on previous lists. I'm a big fan. And what Ray Barretto lends to this record is an sophisticated and intricate percussion layer that absolutely elevates what's being played. I've said it here many times that, in the war between jazz and rock won. But jazz is at its best when I can hear the blues. And this album, just from the name all the way through, everything about it, including the utterly sublime title track, Midnight Blue, screams blues, but with this syrupy, velvety jazz lens. It just makes it it's just a delight to listen from the absolute first 5 seconds. It's so great. Now I haven't found. I suppose I really probably should buy and read a Blue Note retrospective. There have been some incredible books about the history of this label. I would love to know why Alfred Lyon loved this record so much. Leonard Feather, who's how much I love Leonard Feather. He clearly loves this record as well. I think it is a very accessible list, and I've got some records all the way through here where I've picked out a list that I think is a genre list but has accessibility at its core. This is just beautiful. It's hard to find in this condition, so it's a little bit more expensive, but it's great. It really is. Kenny Burrell was on, 80, 90, 100 records. But his first few forays in Blue Note are very special. Midnight Blue, Kenny Burrell. I hinted at a piano jazz record that's on Verve. Black label Verve, up there with Impulse, Verve, and Blue Note. There's the Black label. Beautiful record. This was a more mature player who recorded an album after having played with Dizzy Gillespie and Louis Armstrong. This is Soulville by Ben Webster. The Ben Webster Quintet, to give it the full title. Ben Webster on tenor sax, Oscar Peterson, the Oscar Peterson on piano, Ray Brown on bass, Herb Ellis on guitar. Now, Herb Ellis is an absolute star of the show here. So subtle, so understated. Reminds me in places of Buddy Guy, laying some lines behind these songs, and Stan Levy on drums. This is the record you put on when you just got in, the clock's about to strike midnight, and you think, I'm going to have one more drink, and we're just going to chill. That's when you put on Soulville. It's just give it a listen. That's all I can say. Now, I mentioned Buddy Guy just a second ago. At some point in the next little while, I've got a big tranche of Buddy Guy records from the UK Blues and Soul box that I bought a few months back. I'm slowly making my way through which ones I'm going to keep, which there's quite a few duplicates, so it actually makes it pretty easy. But I keep coming back to this Buddy Guy Junior Wells record. You all know how amazing Hoodoo Man Blues is. 50s, the first time they were in the studio together. Buddy Guy played his guitar through a microphone amp because he blew his, and it's still incredible. But quite a few years later, they toured Japan, and they played in, I think it's called the UB40 Hall. I think it's in Tokyo, but they also played in Hiroshima and a few places. This is 1975, so it's a good 20 years after Hoodoo Man Blues. And this record has only ever been released in Japan, and it is this. I'm just going to move the OB a little bit. I don't want to break it. Maybe I'll leave it. You can see it. Junior Wells and Buddy Guy live at UB40 Hall. And that is the rather limited interior, but a beautiful thing, including OB. I'm going to show you something also special about this. This is the white label promo version of this blues record. There's a few other things I want to show you. Look at that. That's the insert. Buddy Guy and Junior Wells. And you get the story, the lyrics. First time I met the blues, come on home to me, baby, stop breaking down, which of course is on there. Buddy and Junior play the blues record. Help Me Darling, just Sonny Williams songs. So it's just great. Now, it starts off with Junior Wells playing an acoustic set, and then the band builds and builds and builds and builds, and eventually you get Buddy Guy, a bunch of others just playing an absolutely magnificent show. It is a crime that record was only ever released in Japan. It is so good. It really is. And it reminded me of another Junior Wells record that I love. This one doesn't have Buddy Guy on it, but it has the most magnificent sleeve. Junior Wells on tap. And there he is at the bar in the back. Junior Wells, S.E. Reed, Charles Miles on alto sax. This was super funky blues from 1974, the year of my birth. It's a wonderful record. At this point, Junior Wells was a stalwart of the mighty Delmark label, which probably was the best blues label of the 70s. So there you have Junior Wells on tap. All right. Those are two great blues records. I'm going to talk about a soundtrack now very briefly, as I recognize time is creeping on. So a few weeks back, I had Son of My Father by Giorgio Moroder, which is a really great synth record from the 70s. I genuinely mean, it's been sampled by DJ Shadow and many others. It's wonderful. No one bought it, which is, I think, a shame, because it is, I guess it's expensive, but it is a great record. But Moroder went on, of course, to kind of own disco, but he was also very influential in the soundtrack space. So this is the soundtrack to the fantasy movie from the 80s, The Neverending Story, which was the first major Hollywood movie by Wolfgang Anderson, who had just made Das Boot, which was one of the great World War II movies. A very talented director. And the original German version of this soundtrack had pretty much orchestral theme by a German composer called Klaus Dolginger. But to Hollywood it up, Moroder came in and recorded these really cool synth and electronic guitar sounds, and then recorded a kind of a theme song with Lamal, who was the lead singer with Kajagoogoo, and that song went all over the world. So now the soundtrack is a mixture of Lamal, Giorgio Moroder, Klaus Dolringer, and it's really cool. There you have it, complete with OB. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you about some prog rock. I rarely put prog rock records on the list, but I am breaking with tradition. Prog rock is notoriously inaccessible. What I've chosen here from the crates are 4 of what I think are the more accessible and interesting prog rock records that I've enjoyed over the last couple of years. Now, it is not a genre that I know that well. It is not a genre that I love to bits. There are others I prefer. But I will vouch for these 4. And so I'm going to quickly run through them. The first is The Times by Joe with the Flower Travelin Band, which is a bit of a strange name. It is the Flower Travelin Band, who were a Japanese kind of prog / stoner rock band. They released 3 albums in the early 70s. Satori is by far the most famous. It is one of the most kind of sought after Japanese prog kind of stoner rock albums of all time. It is in places quite a difficult, noisy listen for all sorts of reasons. They recorded a couple of other albums. This is a compilation of the more accessible and interesting kind of prog and stoner songs from those 3 records. So you get Satori Part 1, Satori Part 2, Shadows of the Lost Days, and then Makeup, which was the title track of the second album. And it's a really, really, really interesting listen. If you want to hear a little bit or learn a little bit about Japanese prog, Japanese stoner rock, the Flower Travelin Band are where it's at. And this is as good a primer as you will ever need. And Satori costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars, but you get, literally the best of Satori and the best of the other 2 records in that the times, and it's great. And some of the more esoteric songs don't make the cut. All right, what else have I got? What about this? This is the first album titled Camel by the kind of prog rock band Camel, who were British. Andy Ward, Doug Ferguson, Peter Bardens, and Andy Latimer. All of them sang, all of them played multi-instrumentations. And, Snow Goose and others by Camel became, I guess, kind of instrumental prog stalwarts. But I think this is their best. This is by far the most rock-oriented Camel record in my view. None of the songs outside of the welcome. They're pretty funky and interesting. It's a bit of a lost classic, I think. The debut album by Camel. So we've had Japan, we've had the UK. Now we have some Dutch prog rock band, prog rock music. And this is the album is called, I think the album is just called Kayak as well. Yeah, the title, the band called Kayak, and this is their third, I think it's their third album. This is the album that is absolutely regarded as these guys' masterpiece. Now, what you get here is something that's a little bit more akin to a European Genesis. So it's, but not as kind of fairies and, poltergeists, and it's more grounded than that, but is really interesting music. Now, a lot of the musicians from Kayak went on to form Van der Graaf, be responsible for other bands that Van der Graaf generated, but this is the white label promo on the EMI label. And it's really interesting and really fun. Give it a listen, see what you think. And finally, this is another white label promo, so the last 2. This is another British band, and this time I've selected something that's more akin to folk prog. So Griffon were a band that played primarily kind of folk rock for a little while, but this is when they came out their shells. This is a full-on prog masterpiece. The first of their albums, which was instrumental only, 4 pretty lengthy tracks: Opening Move, Second Spasm, Lament, and Checkmate. Richard Harvey, Philip Nestor, probably the most famous. They produced it themselves. Also from the year of my birth, 1974. What you get with this one are, I guess, some of the folk tropes that you might imagine. So more acoustic guitars and more kind of woodwind instruments, etc. But really kind of out there rhythms, and again, I think really quite accessible and fun, and nowhere near as difficult and kind of trying as prog can be. I have played all 4 of these while my wife is here, and she hasn't chucked a hissy. That's kind of like a key signifier I'm on something. And there's 2 out of those 4 that are white label promos. I'm going to have to speed through these last few. I might have to cut some of these short, I think. I'm going to run out of time. So the main ingredient are American vocal jazz group led by Cuba Gooding Sr., whose son was Cuba Gooding Jr., Oscar-winning actor. This is their third, and I think their best album. It's called Euphrates River. Some really funky cover versions, really soulful cover versions. Songs like, can't remember them off the top of my head. I'm going to see if I can dredge them out of my memory. California Happiness is just around the corner. Have you tried it? It's really mellow, groovy, kind of quite typical mid-70s soul record. Maybe better, much better than average. All right, we have Baga da Rhythm, UB40, their dub record from 1985, which became a massive hit off the killer track I Got You Babe, cover version of the Sonny and Cher classic by UB40 and Chrissy Hind. And it is actually really good. And it is serious dub bass and kind of grooves all the way through that one. All right, there's another blues record. I'm going to pause here for a bit because it is too good. This is I Get So Weary by T-Bone Walker. A very early Japanese press. Now, T-Bone Walker in the 50s was one of the great progenitors of soulful vocals and piercing, searing guitar. This guy's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. This is on the Liberty label. I think it's 14 tracks. Every single one of them is great. T-Bone Walker, I'm a big fan. And I Get So Weary is, I think it's 61, maybe 62. It's up there with his blues classics. All right, we'll speed through these last four. Talking about kind of legends, what about Billy Preston? Keyboardist with a small beat combo called The Beatles, I guess at the end of the Beatles' career. This comes with a fold-out poster of Billy. George Harrison and Billy were massive buddies, and George Harrison plays guitar on this album, as does Shuggy Otis. And that, for those of you who know, is pretty bloody special. Another guest on this record is Stevie Wonder. I think this is, of the 9 or 10 solo Billy Preston albums, that one is in the top 2 or 3, and in terms of sheer star power, is as good as it gets. Okay, very quick 3 to go. We have the Stranglers, No More Heroes, a beautiful Aussie first press. This is the second Stranglers album, which was released a mere 3 months after Rattus Norvegicus, their debut. It is harder, faster. The title track is a stone cold classic. A lot of people absolutely adore this album. The Stranglers, and I think they're coming to play soon. Okay, 2 more to go. What about this? The Aussie first press of Ice-T's, absolutely bizarrely named the Iceberg Freedom of Speech. Just watch what you say. And it is what it says in the tin. This is his treatise against the, warnings on CDs and records, etc., driven by Tipper Gore and all her buddies in the 80s and 90s. Opening track, Shut Up, Be Happy, has a killer sample from Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. It's full on. This record really does embrace rock music. The production company or the production unit that worked with Ice-T for his earlier records was called the Rhyme Syndicate. And this is, I think, the highlight of their career. And then finally, I have Burning Love, Elvis Presley, a compilation of the best of Elvis's soundtracks. There you have it. What a mix that is. Hope you find something to explore. If you would like to be on the price list, drop me a note. shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. Sayonara. I'll be back soon with a classic rock list. Bye.